All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the live chat for Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. Of course, I'm your meteorologist, Stephen DiMartino. Well, we have a couple of things to talk about this evening. One of them, unfortunately, is not a winter storm, although I do have my eye on an interesting situation that is something that I've been talking about for a while now, as this Arctic air mass leaves, but we'll touch on that in a moment. So tonight, I figure I focus on La Nina, or lack thereof. I know that they officially called La Nina, but I'm going to explain why I have some issues with that and break down some of the data and how I usually look at tropical forcing, just so you guys kind of get an idea on that. And also, I am going to also focus on, see, make sure that I got my SOI data up there as well. That's going to be important. So I'm also going to focus on our pattern evolution and where we're at overall as we head into February. Is winter over? Spoiler, it's not. And also go over the next 90 hours and also next week, which I have some interesting views on. And of course, as always, I am going to take your questions. I decided to move the live chat information to this screen because looking this way probably is not the best way to actually conduct all this. I'm learning. It's only taken me like 5 years to figure all this stuff out. So, I'll be able to read everything right from here and look at the camera. And of course, as always, all questions will be answered in the premium chat, as you guys are premium consulting members. So you get all your questions answered. And then we'll check out social media and see what is popping out there. The best questions I'll answer. The ones that are not so good, I probably will just pass along. So let's dive into the data and pull this up. So currently, right now, it is cold. It is too cold. I love winter. I love winter a lot more than summer. But when it's so cold out that when you go outside, it literally feels like you're about to freeze in 2 seconds, that's too cold. And when it's cold enough that temperatures are below zero and your dew points in Trenton are below or at -2. Temperatures right now in the mid-teens, a little bit warmer in your urban areas, upper teens, really, really hot and sultry in Philadelphia and New York City at 18 and 19 degrees. We're already falling into the single digits over the interior, and it's only going to get colder. With the high pressure over the region and light variable winds, you're going to have the capability of dropping those temperatures to close to zero, if not below zero, especially over the interior where you have a little bit better snowpack. And it was so cold that as moisture got thrown into southern New Jersey last night, down towards, let's say, Atlantic City, even pushed into some of the coastal waters of coastal beaches on Monmouth County and Ocean County, you had a little bit of snow. And if this storm had lasted a little bit longer, like a couple of hours, it could have produced a pretty nice snow accumulation because the snow ratios were through the roof. But alas, our storm missed out, and what we have instead is just a couple flurries around the region. There is just a ton of dry air, limiting any type of development. And when we take a look at this satellite picture, let's refresh this real fast. You can see the pattern is such that there are plenty of disturbances, plenty of short waves, and the polar and subtropical jet stream are a little bit better aligned. At least now you have a southwesterly flow on both jet streams, but just the timing of these short waves is not working out, and so the subtropical short waves are marching along a little bit, and they're not catching the polar short waves that are more dominant and stronger, which is typical of a positive QBO winter. So we're seeing all that play out. And so as a result, there just isn't much in the way of moisture. Okay, this is the precipitable water value in the lowest 400 millibars. So let's say about 600 millibars up. And we're at 0.1 inches. That's really, really small. That really is. That's really, really low. And basically, any type of moisture you get out of this is basically just less than a tenth of an inch, just a few flurries. So I kind of wanted to show you just how dry this air mass is. So that's where we're at right now, and that's the current state. Now, I do want to go over some of the tropical forcing factors here and kind of go over this whole thing with La Nina, because the CPC announced that we are officially in a La Nina advisory. And I thought that maybe they should have waited a week, maybe two, before making that announcement. Now, the reason why they did that is a couple of weeks ago, we spiked at minus 1.1 degrees Celsius, which you can see that spike right there. And as a result, they decided to jump the gun and call this a La Nina. And the reality is that for most of this time period, it was not anywhere near La Nina conditions. And now finally got to the point where we are for a couple of weeks. But notice in Nino 3, Nino 1 plus 2, we aren't able to sustain it. Nino 4, right now, we're finally just getting to the edge of it. Again, this is the threshold right here. And even that's starting to lose some support. And you can see the evolution of this La Nina over the past couple of weeks. And quite frankly, it looks like it's already collapsing. That's because it is. So when I'm looking at this, I'm not just looking at this in terms of, and I'm trying to explain this so that way you guys understand my forecasting process and kind of learn something rather than, a lot of individuals out there, they just give you a hypish forecast and don't really educate you on what they're seeing or why they're seeing it. So I think this is a great time to discuss, you know, how do you forecast the influences of La Nina or El Nino? And one of the important factors is duration. See, the atmosphere doesn't just switch on a dime. You have to have prolonged influence to create enough of an impact on the 500 millibar pattern. So I ask you, over the past week, would you say the impacts that have been observed in on the Gulf Coast, I'm being careful here, the Gulf Coast, is is that more of a La Nina or an El Nino? Or just nada, no influence whatsoever? What do we typically experience in a La Nina? Robust southeast ridge, or at least one that's present enough to, I don't know, not support snowfall down to Louisiana, right? So it's not exactly behaving. The pattern isn't exactly behaving in respect of a La Nina. And also the duration of this cold water, it it basically jumped, spiked, and now it's crashing. And the other way to look at it is the subsurface. And this is really key. If you want to understand how long how long a La Nina is going to last, you want to take a look at the subsurface. And you want, again, there's a bit of a lag on this, but think of this as, your fuel. And if you're seeing your fuel for an event basically spike and then begin to crash just as fast, that tells you like this isn't going to be able to hang around very long. Yeah, you might get a spike, but what is the spike being caused by? So you look at this, the reason why I like using this chart is that it kind of gives you a timeline a little bit better, right? So during much of the summer and in the fall, when a lot of people were even talking about a historic La Nina and strong La Nina. And in reality, we pretty much got La Nada all the way through the fall and into December. In late December and January, you can make a claim that we had a La Nina ish type environment, but again, the support for your La Nina was very weak and very poorly supported. So again, this looks more like a cold neutral signal than a true La Nina signal. And another factor to consider is the ONI. Now, the ONI tells you a lot about the strength and duration of your La Nina or El Nino event. Now, I'm going to scroll all the way up to the 1950s. I know it's been a long time, but let's take a look at this here, right? Let's see. La Nina, certainly what we're looking for is about five periods in a row. See, the minimum is at 5 consecutive overlapping seasons. So each one of these is considered like a season period, right? So when you're looking at this for either El Nino or La Nina, at least 5. Usually it's more, right? So you're seeing that with this one, 1954. Here's a long duration one of the 3-year ones, 1955, 56. Let's see, you started off in 54. You got your El Ninos, look, certainly more than 5. Same thing over here, 1963, 1964 La Nina. Look, see, they're all, at the very least, more than 5, right? Every single one of these that's been designated as a true La Nina or El Nino, right? You clearly see even the weak ones. Yeah, it's weak, it's barely, but it does qualify because you had a duration, right? And you had an influence in this El Nino, this La Nina, more than 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it just wasn't barely. It was truly, impressive in terms of getting up down to a -1 degree Celsius. Let's see, 1988, 89. Let's go sooner. Let's go into the 2000s. Yep, definitely 5, over 5 here. The 2000 La Nina, so almost, see, 12, 13, 14 months. Let's see, how about the 2010s? Yeah, every single La Nina that was designated, at least 5, in some cases up to 8. This one had a little brief break, so you had 2 different time periods, this El Nino. Then we get to this year. Hey, we have a La Nina. Oh, yeah? How many ONI periods do you have? Well, we might be support 1. Out of over 70 years of data, where have we supported a La Nina signal with just 1? Not one La Nina or El Nino event. And somehow we're calling this one a La Nina. So call me skeptical here, but I don't think it has a duration. So it makes you wonder, okay, how much of an impact is this going to actually have? And what's really driving the tropical forcing here? The reality is that our ENSO data spiked cold because our SOI values spiked positive. And since then, since mid-December, they have been steadily weakened to the point that it's neutral now. So you're going to have these waves of positive and negative features on the daily, but your monthly values, well, they went negative, which is more El Nino like than La Nina. Now, in reality, when we look at this, I would just call it neutral. So what really drove this cold spike was the MJO. When did this all occur? It occurred. We supported that cold spike here when this region here supports more of a La Nina support. So we moved into here. Then we got out of it, and since then it's been falling. Why? Because the MJO is in phases 8, 1, and 2. The evolution of this whole pattern in tropical forcing was clearly connected more to the MJO than anything in ENSO base. And that's why we're seeing a steady weakening, because it's lost its support. Now, what's interesting with this MJO forecast is that it's expected to move into phase 3. Now, understand, with it being in phase 3 now, that's different than when it's in phase 3 in December or November. In November and December, phase 3 is more of a La Nina warm signal. But when you're in late January and February, phase 3 is a cold signal. And it's pretty damn cold out there. Now, what's expected with this is the MJO, by the time we get into early February, is expected to move into phase 7, which is a warm phase, but is heading towards a phase 8 and possibly 1 and 2 as we move through February. We have to watch to see how that evolves. But this signal here tells me, yeah, it's most likely going to be a relaxation of our Arctic cold weather pattern. But of course, this year, tropical forcing is not the strongest. So the dominant influence clearly in terms of forcing is what's going on with our polar vortex. And in this case, we're seeing once again support after a contraction. There's our contraction. It goes right back into a stretch once again, right towards North America. And this signal for February is another robust negative EPO pattern, a negative Arctic oscillation pattern. This is going to drop south. But the question is, do we get a negative NAO pattern? And I'm less confident of that. So this looks like another cold pattern with progressive short waves. Um, I wouldn't rule out the potential for moderate winter storms in February, and based on this signal and what we're seeing with the tropical forcing, we're clearly, when we take a look at the 500 millibar pattern, I said a couple of days ago to premium members, which by the way, only $15 a month, so definitely check that out. And if you like this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Let everyone know where you get the best weather information from. It really helps the channel on YouTube and on X and so on and so forth. But take a look at this evolution of this 500 milliball pattern. And what it's basically showing here is that, yeah, we're going to get some moderation of this Arctic air mass. And that has my attention, which I'll talk about in a moment. But it also shows that as soon as it retracts, it gets ready to reload and gets ready to drop south. And just look at this feature here. What this feature tells me, dominant Arctic air returning. Our ridge, if you want to call it a southeast ridge, really just gets displaced. It's a western Atlantic ridge, really. And again, you have your storm track somewhere in this ballpark right here, setting up once again for, let's shoot for February 7th through February 20th. Okay, right in that time period. And while you're doing that, you have a nice robust ridge in the Gulf of Alaska. Like I said this to Lee Goldberg, and I said this on here back in the fall. When the ridge pops in Alaska and it warms up, we get Arctic air. And that is basically what this is showing. And that is what the ensembles are showing. And what that tells us is, if you think that this pattern is going to go into a torch in February, the only torch you're going to have is whatever you have indoors to keep yourself warm, because this Arctic air mass that comes through for early February comes into the northern plains, gets ready to drive towards the East Coast, and guess what? There's more on the way after that, just ready to surge southward. And that sets up a nice thermal gradient over the deep south from the Gulf Coast up into the mid-Atlantic. Then it becomes a question of, hey, are the short waves going to interact? But I want to be very clear in this pattern, in terms of the way it preliminarily looks, when we take a look at the 500 millibar pattern, I don't see a sustained negative NAO pattern in this setup. I don't. And so as a result, you have a lot of thread the needle type situations. You have a lot of situations where this shortwave and this shortwave have to play nice. And if they don't, then you end up with a dry weather pattern. Okay? Cold and dry. It has a lot of potential, but as long as I have this feature here sitting up on Greenland, it needs to get dropped down towards the Hudson Bay. If this drops down towards the Hudson Bay, then we can start talking about real dynamic winter storms, your 1 to 2 feet winter storms, the type of winter storms you put in the Coastal and Mussolini book. Right now, what this would support is a lot of 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8 type events that we've been seeing for much of December and January. Not anything bad. It certainly keep you busy if you're a snow removal individual, but not exactly the blockbuster winter storms that some people are looking for or fear, one way or the other. But plenty of cold air, that is for sure. And see, the issue with this pattern, and again, you don't take this verbatim, but the issue here is that in order to get a winter storm, you really got to tap into this moisture source because otherwise you just get overwhelmed with all this dry Arctic air. But you also see the potential here. That's a lot of deep tropical moisture getting ready to get thrown in to a lot of Arctic air if you get the alignment set up just right. But that's the key here. That's the problem with this pattern. And this is one of the issues I brought up in the winter forecast, that I wasn't confident in the development of the negative NAO for the winter. I liked if the polar vortex stretched a lot, I liked the cold weather pattern, and I liked the idea of an active weather pattern, but I wasn't confident on the idea of above normal snowfall here. So that's why I went below normal on the coast and eking out near normal over the interior. And so far that's worked out. If we get that blocking set up, man, that could change February awfully a lot. I mean, then it's game on. You got the cold air, you got the moisture, you got an alignment, you got the tropical forcing. You just need to get this thing out of Greenland and drop it into the Hudson Bay. So, in the meantime, we've already got questions about storms for next week. And let me tell you something about this period of time in late January up through February 2nd. Let's say January 27th through February 2nd. You have a retreating Arctic air mass. And typically, with a retreating Arctic air mass, you get a winter storm. So, on the European guidance right now, it has a lake cutter that basically transfers to the Gulf of Maine, which isn't too bad of a forecast, but we'll take a look at the 500 millibar pattern. And then, of course, our friend, the GFS, well, it produces a winter storm, and a pretty good one over the region. Now, I'm skeptical of the strength of this low pressure system, but let's for a second look at the 500 millibar pattern. How do we get this? Okay, because what a lot of people do is that they post a surface map and they get you all excited, and then you watch the models, possibly on a model website or on someone's X account or whatever, and they tie you in for 6 days of watching this stuff at 2 a.m., watching the zero Z model guidance, hoping to see the same thing again. So let's look behind this image and look at the mechanisms. Well, first, we have the European guidance. Now, when I look at the European guidance, the first thing that I notice here is this gets stretched out quite a bit. Okay, and this is kind of important to me because, let me get that, because the reason why I find this interesting is that it shears this apart. It just rips it apart. So when we see that signal here, it could be an error. So let's work this out. So because of this shearing factor here, what it does is that it keeps most of your energy back here in the west, and it causes the polar shortwave to race out and your subtropical shortwave to get sheared apart. And so by the time it reaches the coast, it is basically trash. And then what happens after the other shortwave heads out? Well, let's see what that looks like. Well, then you already lose your ridge. So your ridge is gone. Oops. Your ridge is gone, and your disturbance is able to lift up in this direction and then gets redeveloped out. So let's see how that looks. So it runs into the block and then gets forced into redevelopment towards the Gulf of Maine. Now, the problem with all of these depictions on the European is that it kind of splits the short waves in here and creates two upper level lows, which is a bit questionable. It's not impossible, but it looks a little bit too much of an error here, especially the way in which it splits and shears it apart. So that's how you get a storm tracking up into the Great Lakes and then redeveloping as the Arctic air is leaving. Now, the GFS, what is it doing? Well, it holds on to the shortwave for the most part. Instead of splitting it evenly, it allows a little piece to exit out, but the bulk of the PVA is hanging back here. I don't like this here where it looks like a smiley face. Look at that. Looks like a little ghost here. One, two, and smiley right there. That's usually a bit questionable. And then it marches itself out. And then how does it get a winter storm? Well, look at it. For once, the polar shortwave, the subtropical shortwave, which is right here, is out ahead of the polar shortwave. Right. At some point, I'm going to get this drawing right. This is why I would never be good at NFL games. So, again, this is really key. Why? Because this feature is able to dive into the backside of this trough, and that causes it to go negative. So let's see what the GFS does with that. Dives it in, it goes negative tilt, and it allows this shortwave. Now, I have a lot of questions on this because throughout the entire season, this shortwave has always been, well, a little bit too slow. And this shortwave is always too dominant. That's what we've seen all winter. That's how we go from 7 to 10 days out a winter storm to basically a big disappointment and a sheared out low pressure system. This is how we lose our 20 to 30 inch snowfalls that you see on the 15-day GFS or European. Hey, European's shown those solutions as well. But in reality, it's more of a moderate storm. So if I was forced to do a forecast in this scenario, like, hey, what do you think is going to happen? I'd probably go something in between. I would say, look, this is probably not going to be a major storm because you don't really have the 500 millibar pattern for it. But could this be a moderate event? Maybe some mix on the coast and some snow over the interior? Yeah, I could definitely see that happening as this Arctic air is leaving and as the pattern's reloading. That's typically something that will happen in this type of scenario, but I would not be advertising anything beyond that based on that information. So that's pretty much what I have for tonight. Now I'm going to answer all your questions, see what we got out here. First, of course, we will take care of all the premium consulting members. Let's see here. Snowball says, let's see. Hope winter storm is not over, but it's not looking good. Tell us good news, Steve. I can tell you that the winter storm season is not over. I would just temper your expectations away from any type of like Coast and Mussolini type winter storms, the 1 to 2 feet. Is it possible? It's possible. Anytime you have plenty of Arctic air and you have an active subtropical jet stream, it's certainly possible. But I would not look for major storms like the 1 to 2 feet type scenario. 3 to 6, 4 to 8, a little bit of sleet and snow. Absolutely. Looks like a lot of cold air at the poles over Siberia. So if the vortex stretches again towards North America, a lot of cold air will be transported. Yeah, I don't think, unfortunately, we're done with the Arctic blasts anytime soon. All right. And I'm a little concerned about early March as well, because we see this again in early March. Man, look, there is nothing I hate more than a March winter storm. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because you have a lot of boundary layer conditions where it looks like you're going to get like 5 inches of snow, but then it happens in the morning. So, like, barely a tenth of it actually accumulates, even though you're right on the QPF. It is just a nightmare to forecast for because you have a higher sun angle. So, you're trying to calculate that versus the amount of snow that is showing up if we were in January or even mid-February. So, not my favorite type of winter storms, but I definitely see a lot of the Arctic air. I have a major issue with La Nina December, the way I have with tropical systems that don't meet the time definition aspect. 24-hour storm clusters, 2-week cold front, cold pools, do not tropical system will La Nina make? Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the duration matters. Now, technically, all right, if you want to use the CPC definition, there is no timestamp on this, right? But look at 70 years of data and you see that there's no support for that, right? So maybe they'll call it La Nina conditions, but won't acknowledge it as a true La Nina. That's a possibility. That's going to be something that they're going to have to put out and see if they issue it. But over 70 years of data, I've never seen just one time period. Again, this has to get to 5 time periods, five of those time periods. And right now, it's going to struggle to get one. To the last comment, the equivalent of grade inflation in schools. Oh, yeah, don't get me started on that. Uh, all I could say is that when I was in college, they removed all the meteorology students. They removed our grades from the physics class because we blew the curve. Because we would have failed everybody in class because we actually earned A's, and everyone else is like, "Hey, I got a 75. That should be an A." I'm like, "No, that should be a C." But whatever. Has the QBO weakened any further? Gradually. It's still positive. It's bouncing around +9 and +10. So it's not collapsing completely, which I wasn't expecting, but most likely by the summer we'll be in a negative phase or easterly phase, the way things are evolving. Definitely by next winter. And then that's a whole other ball of wax that we're going to have to figure out and work with. Looking at the drought monitoring, this is from Hugo. It has most of the region in severe or extreme drought. Yeah, totally. I looked at the 12Z long range European and GFS models. They have very little, if any, moisture for the region. You mentioned in the summer and fall, the drought can feed back on itself. So even storms we did get, we had very little water content in the snow, even most clippers approach. Yeah, this is becoming an issue. Okay, now here's the good news. In the mid Atlantic, especially in our temperate zones, we will shift. We will return back to a very active weather pattern, very wet weather pattern. But unfortunately, as it stands right now, our drought pattern, if you want to call it that, really started in May about the same time we actually put in our landscaping, go figure, and it hasn't abated. Now we will flip back and we'll get enough rainfall and snow to say, okay, no more. But unfortunately, it just hasn't broken. I thought it might have a chance to at least relax a bit with a more active subtropical jet stream, but unfortunately, it just hasn't panned out so far. Region seems to underperform. Do you think the drought is impacting the lack of snow? It's certainly a factor, absolutely. I think also just frankly just bad luck in the way that we're watching the evolution of a lot of these short waves. But it's curious to see, and we'll have to go back and look at some of the radar data to see if where we've seen our most extreme droughts, if that is limiting some of the mesoscale banding. The very cold air in the mid Atlantic and Northeast, uh, but a lack of snow really reminds me of the years of the 1970s. To me, it reminds me of the 1980s. It really does. I've mentioned this before, where again, we flipped eventually, to a very stormy pattern. Remember, in the 2010s, mid 2010s, in fact, there was a lot of discussions about how global warming was going to cause constant winter storms because we were in a very active winter storm pattern. Now they're saying global warming is causing a lack of winter storms. Well, you can't have both. It's you kind of have to remove the whole global warming climate change discussion and understand what our climatology is normally. This is normal in terms of having these snow droughts or precipitation droughts and then going back to a very active weather pattern. So, we just have to have patience until we get out of it, unfortunately. Well, if the pattern is really good to reload for February, and it is, then we are screwed on this snow front. Maybe, maybe not. Patterns are hard to break, so there would be no reason to think anything would be different in February. Well, in terms, I somewhat agree with you, Snow Boss, in respect of looking for the blockbuster major winter storm, 1 to 2 feet, that type of stuff. I would agree with you. I don't see any data to support that narrative changing. And this is why when you look at forecasts and model data that's like 7 to 15 days out of major winter storms of like 20, 30 inches of snow, you should be extremely skeptical of that because that just isn't the type of pattern we're in. Now, if you want to talk about 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8, even, yeah, I think that is definitely possible for the region. It's possible for your region. But if you're looking for that, monster storm, I don't see it because it's not a theme in this weather pattern, and it hasn't been. I said this back in October. You know, the only way you're going to change the theme of this weather of this winter, especially for the coast where I was expecting below normal snowfall, would be if you got that one blockbuster storm that just kind of changed the narrative of the winter. But right now, I really don't see that in the forecast right now. All right, now can that change? Could we pull off a brief negative NAO at the right time? Absolutely. I'm not saying that can't happen. I just don't have any data to tell you that that's going to happen. Let's see. I do not remember a season that has been so dry. Oh, I have. Oh, I definitely have. I definitely have. Growing up, let's see, 85, 86, 87 reminds, I definitely remember those. Um, 91, kind of. Maybe it's because there's more rain and, being a kid, I didn't really care about rain. But definitely 90 to 91 was definitely another one. So we definitely have seen this before. I'm old enough to remember some that have been this dry around here. Yep, basic 70s, 80s. We've definitely seen this. I like the idea of a winter storm January 31st to February 1st. This is from Aaron. Perhaps some ice with warm air overrunning into cold air. Yeah, I could definitely see something like that. Absolutely. I could definitely see something where we go to like snow, sleet, and freezing rain, and then rain on the coast, and then a wintry mix of snow and sleet over the interior, that type of setup. I am not as gung ho with the GFS depiction of a dominant coastal low over the coastal waters based on the way that the whole pattern's evolving. I like more of um, a primary low towards, let's say, Ohio and a secondary low along the coast, and you got this big warm front. That makes more sense with the pattern. But again, we'll have to see how these short waves evolve. Anything is possible. Yep, that is true. Let me see here. Card says, notice the past couple of weeks, the bulk of the sunspot activity is now northern hemisphere sun. Yeah, there's definitely been a shift. A little bit less active. That's definitely been showing up. I don't think we're at the point of falling off of our grand solar maximum just yet, but I think we will be in a couple of months, and probably by about 2027, 2028, we'll be pushing into our solar minimum discussions. I was very late to joining the chat. This is Bill. How long after it ends will we'll be able to watch for the beginning? From the beginning. Oh, I guess the video. Oh, you mean this? Honestly, I think it's almost immediate. Like it's within a couple of minutes, this reloads. It saves on YouTube. That reminds me. I almost forgot. Yeah, that reminds me. I went back through the entire channel and I actually made little segments, little playlists. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Little playlists. My wife saving my butt once again. Little playlists of every winter storm that I did a discussion on. So it goes all the way back to like the President's Day storm, and God, some of them are really bad. I gotta be honest with you because I was still learning how to do production and everything else like that. but like all of the hourly breakdowns, that's all going to be now organized, and so that way you could go check out the storms, see how I did, and I'll continue to evolve that. And going forward, I'll just keep on setting that up into playlists. So hope you guys enjoy that. Um, the one thing to keep in mind is that we get two short waves to line up. We could get 2, 3 storms back to back. Absolutely. If you line up one storm, the next one feeds the next one, and then one after that. Because what happens is that then you change the entire 500 millibar pattern in the Atlantic. So you kind of create that blocking, and you get that feedback. Uh, Another parallel is 1976, 77, and the 77, 78 winters. And then 73, 74, 75, 76 was lousy. Absolutely. Let's take a look, see what we got on YouTube. Holy crap. Wow. All right. Let's see what we have here. Uh, your, I was willing to let's see answer Joey's question, and was someone being a little bit of a pain? Oh, what the winter storm from the last winter storm? Okay, no, you know what? I do make everything up, and I control the weather at the same time. Just so you know, because I get blamed for both. But in one case, I did make adjustments last minute in the last forecast, and I actually discussed this. Is great because I actually discussed this in the forecast overview. I wrote for all you premium members. There's a forecast overview, and I rate myself and say, okay, what could I have done better? I should have never made that last change to the forecast. I should have just stayed what I had with my second update and just let it ride. And that was where it was 3 to 6 inches in central New Jersey up to New York City. That would have verified much better. And I think what happened is that I got a little caught up with the cold air that I was watching the observations, and then I saw the changes showing up in the mesoscale guidance, and I jumped on that too fast, and so that was an error on my part, and that's why parts of zone 3, zone 1, 2, and 3 actually was great. Zone 5 was great. Zone 4 in the last forecast sucked because I jumped on that cold on the cold observations a little too hard. So I should have kept it at 3 to 6 rather than make the change that I did on the final forecast. Um, no, well, I think that's something that really we need to teach people. And not to get on a soapbox here, but if you're going to be involved in social media, ask yourself this: would you say this to my face? Right? Because these days, everyone it feels big and bad because they can hide on their TV and they can type and they're a keyboard warrior and all that stuff. But would you say it to my face? Probably not. Um, But it's fair to say, hey, what happened with this forecast? And that's why premium members get that discussion. Let's see here. Why do TV people associate average temperature as being normal? Isn't daily average temperature the sum of T max? Okay, so the average temperature, we consider that normal, but normal is based off the idea of extremes, right? So normal temperatures, most times, is rarely normal, which is kind of ironic, right? Um, the average temperature that you get is kind of giving you a ballpark of where you should be. That doesn't mean that if your average is 40 and you're at 39, that there's something like there's like a cold air mass. It's below the average, but it's within in the ballpark. And usually, when they give you an average temperature, what you really want to do is maybe do ±3, and that's usually the range you are in the season. But when it comes to TV presentations, it's not like what we have here where I could sit here and explain everything to you and break it down. Those guys got like 30 seconds. They got to get in, say what their forecast is, knock things out. You might get 2 minutes if there's an actual storm, but hey, we have to do a Paris Hilton hit piece. So you have 30 seconds to say what you got to say, and then you got to get out. So those guys, they don't have the time to say, okay, this is what this means and that's what that means. Like, this is the normal, this is where we're at, these are the temperatures, we're going to be warm, we're going to be cold, chance of rain, have a good night, off to you, John, at the desk. That's it. And the Weather Channel was unique in that you could actually sit there and listen and break down the forecast. But even that, unfortunately, has transferred over to more of a hurry up, explain it, and then we're going to be putting on something about some guy logging in the woods and eating a bear or something. So unfortunately, you don't get that anymore. But that's why you see that on TV weather. It's not necessarily their fault. They have limitations on what they work with. Uh, let's see here. I really didn't cut back totals a lot though. I don't know where that's come from. What is more difficult, forecasting for the tri-state area or forecasting for lake effect? Actually, I it's far more difficult to forecast here than lake effect snow in the Great Lakes. The While it is difficult to do convective snowfall, you're dealing with one air mass source, and then you're using mesoscale data to fine tune, your forecast. So back then it was the ruck. Now you can use the HRR guidance. So it's a little bit easier. I mean, it's you can at least get in the ballpark of where the heaviest snowfall is going to be, and you don't have to worry about changeovers or anything like that. In the northern Mid Atlantic, you're dealing with, at the very least, an interaction of four different air masses with different mesoscale and microscale climate factors, different orographic factors. You got the Appalachians, you got the Hudson Highlands, you got the immediate coast in terms of the coastal plain. So you got different sea breeze fronts and different coastal fronts to work with. So there's a lot of factors in that. So I would say that the Mid Atlantic is a lot harder to forecast for. Uh, duh, duh, duh. Why did the storm from this weekend for the Northeast move out so fast? The problem is that there wasn't really a negative NAO. The negative NAO was collapsing. You lost your blocking potential. And so the whole system, the whole pattern, really it's been the whole theme of this winter, is very progressive and fast moving. I heard some meteorologists talk about this winter having a positive TNH pattern. Yeah, that's just another name for a negative EPO pattern. Basically, it means you have a northwesterly flow over North America that transports a lot of polar and Arctic air. It's the same thing. Let's see here. Uh, let's see. Any other good questions? What would you say is the best ENSO phase combined with best NAO phase for the winter storms, in your opinion? A very weak El Nino with a moderate to weak negative NAO. Because if you have a strong negative NAO, it just kind of suppresses things. A weak NAO is enough that it allows blocking, but it doesn't suppress a storm. So I think that works. And then your weak El Nino, it doesn't allow the subtropical jet stream to overwhelm the pattern, but it adds plenty of moisture and interaction with the polar jet stream. So that's usually my best combo. Let's see. February is snowier than January. That's definitely true. That's true for much of the Mid Atlantic and New England. Let's see here. Soon enough, we'll experience winter that will make up for the last several. Yep, most likely. I guarantee we will. Let's see here. Well, it's not so much courage. It's just, I don't know. What's the word? What would you say? I wouldn't say it was courage. It was just credibility. Look, when you're a young meteorologist, you want to be like the best, and you don't want to admit that you're wrong because you have an ego. You have to have an ego to do this because you're basically forecasting chaos, right? And you're forecasting extreme volatility. And so you have to have an ego in order to do this, talk yourself up, so to speak. But also, I guarantee you, every meteorologist, every single one, including myself, also has a voice in their back of their head saying, "You're horrible. You're not as good. You're not. You don't deserve, being certified. You don't deserve any accolades. You don't deserve to be on TV. Uh, you don't need to criticize us. We criticize Susan. How? Yes. I bash myself before. You don't need to. I already talk bad about myself more than enough. So one of the things, the only way you get better is by admitting your mistakes so you can improve. And you will be making mistakes. There will be nobody. I know some of you guys, you're like, oh, he did this wrong. If you did this, you would be wrong as much or more because there is not going to be a meteorologist. They could be 90 years old. They're still going to make mistakes because you're forecasting chaos and you're forecasting um, the interaction of water vapor in a chaotic pattern in a multi-dynamic environment involving cities, mountains, plains, bogs that influence low level temperatures, mesoscale dynamics. I can go on. So whenever I come across somebody who is really, really rude, and like saying like, "You're horrible, you're fake," I'm like, all right, fine. You do the multivariable calculus. Let me know what you come up with. That's all. You know, it's one thing. Sometimes you might make some maps and you might pull it off a forecast, and hey, that's great. That's great. Whatever you did, keep doing it. But eventually, especially if you want to do this for a career, you have to be able to explain why you did what you did and also explain why you were wrong. See, anyone can make a map. Anyone could pull a snow map. Anyone can make some fancy graphics and scream and yell and scare you and say, "Oh, it's the worst storm ever," or "It's coming for you." Anyone could do that stuff. A clown, a monkey could do that. Anyone could do that. But it takes talent to say, this is what went wrong. This is what I was seeing. This is why it went wrong. And here are the laws of physics that caused it to be wrong, why my idea was wrong. And if you can't do that, you can't be in the game. Let's see here. Let's see here. Is summer going to be hotter than last? I don't know yet. Yeah. It kind of depends on what we see with El Nino and La Nina. Any questions on X or Facebook or any of those guys? February. Okay. Well, we went over February, so we definitely covered that. Anything else beyond that? As long as it doesn't snow on February 21st, that's my concert. Understood. Again, I don't control. Look, also, your birthday is around then, so it'd be bad to have a winter storm around then because we kind of want to go out, have some fun, But might be nice, yeah. Where can we find the playlist on your channels? Okay, so I'm still tweaking it, but you should be able to. Let's see here. Find it. Yeah, it's definitely on the main channel. So if you go to the main channel and scroll down, let me go take a look here. So when you go to the main channel, it'll say playlists, and then it lists all the playlists. So I'm seeing it right now. It has like all the winter storms and stuff. Let me see if I can pull it up on here. 1 second. Might as well see if I can pull this off. So let's see here. I'm gonna do it as logged out because okay. All right. So let me throw this up. There we go. Hey, there's the page. Look, there's a live chat going on. What do you know? All right. So if you hit playlist right here, there it is. You know, Hurricane Sandy, Winter Storm from January 6th, Winter Storm January 31st. Yeah. So yeah, you could do it on the home, which is look at that. God, I gotta learn how to do that video better. But yeah, there's all the past live streams, and here's all the playlists. Or you could just go right back up here and hit playlists, and there they are. And going forward, I'll just keep them in playlists and go from there. Right, exactly. Exactly. Let's see. I knew thunderstorm was a possibility, but having a nearby cloud to ground lightning strike during the storm was a real surprise. It was impressive. I knew that that was a threat. I looked at it, and if I think if the Arctic cold air had gotten in a little bit faster, but it wasn't because the low pressure system was even weaker than some of the weaker model guidance. But because of the weaker low, it took longer for the Arctic air to get in, and so the snow ratios I was expecting didn't pan out. But if it did with that type of thunder snow, holy smokes, we would definitely be talking about 6 inches over northeastern Jersey with that. I think we need to stop naming winter storms. Yes, I agree. I think naming winter storms is a horrible idea. Do you expect any snowstorms for the lower Great Lakes in February? That's from Josh. I would vote. I would lean more towards lake effect snow. You might get that lake cutter towards the end of the month, but not really. I mean, you guys out there, Ohio, all those areas, more like lake effect snow or clippers, but not major storms. What's the ice coverage on the Great Lakes? It's actually getting filled up pretty good. So that's actually going to be a factor that's going to cut down some of the snowfall. I think it's up to 65%. Hey Steve, when it asks me when I sign in for my location, does it help you if I say yes? Oh, okay. It doesn't really help me. It helps you more. Um, the reason why I have that on there is that part of the website, all right, when it asks for your location, is that it's lined up to give you the proper watches and warnings. Because so basically on the top of the website, it'll scroll the latest winter storm watch advisories, whatever. So that's why it's a good idea to do that. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. I get it. Let's see. Wow. Let's see here. Let's see here. The forecast for Zone 4 was excellent. I appreciate that. Again, this is part of me. I'm not satisfied until I'm in. I don't consider it a good forecast unless I'm above 97% accuracy for winter storms. So I'm never happy. But that also means I'm constantly trying to get better. Um, no, I wasn't part of the North Jersey weather observers in the 1990s because I was in middle school and I wish I knew about it, but back then you really couldn't find much stuff on weather. Uh, yeah, and I'm 45 years old. What do you know? Uh, my favorite meteorologist was Jim Cantori. Uh, Lloyd Lindsay Young, that was another great one. He was great. Uh, let's see here. I'm not going to go over the synoptics for the February 17th, 2024 storm now. Maybe that's something we could do in the spring. Let's see, anything. I think that's pretty much it. Let me just check the community chat here. I think that's everything. Well, this has been a great chat. It's 9 p.m. It's time for bed because I need some sleep. But yes, I do. I don't sleep much. That's got to change. But um, it has been a great night. I want to thank you all for joining us and asking outstanding questions, even the difficult ones, like, hey, why were you wrong? Hey, I appreciate it. It keeps me honest. Um, but as always, thank you, all the premium members. Believe me, you guys make a difference. You're amazing. Thank you for trusting in me to provide weather information for you and explanations. I really appreciate it. For those of you who are not premium members, I thank you as well. You know, those of you on YouTube and X and Facebook, because yeah, you look, you spread the word. And if you're interested in becoming a premium member, it's only $15 a month, 150 a year, and you get awesome weather content, discussions, and awesome videos. And of course, if you have a party or whatever, drop me an email and I'll help you out. In the meantime, I'm going to sign off. And as always, stay safe out there.